looking for escapism, I just want to escape.
Welcome back to my disembodied voice. There is a tradition in our house. Once we hit December and the Christmas countdown starts in earnest, me and Mrs. Crow start watching our Christmas season of festive horror films, and we always start by cracking open the Krampus Blu-ray and settling in for an evening of black comedy horror at its finest. Released in 2015, Krampus is an American horror film which deals with the anthropomorphic horned figure of the European folklore, which is the anti-Santa Claus, who, according to legend, comes to see naughty children and punish them with birch rods. Coming from the Bavarian word Krampen, meaning dead and rotten, or from the German Krampen, meaning claw, he has become a figure now popularised through many low-budget horror films. However, the film I'm focusing on today is the 2015 version starring Toni Collette, Adam Scott and David Kushner. Directed by Michael Dougherty, with the special effects team of Weta, the film deals with two families bound by blood relation but nothing else, stuck with each other over the Christmas period, and a boy who, at the apex point of conflict during the film, renounces Christmas, rips up his letter to Santa and, upon the Christmas spirit dying in his heart, calls the anti-Santa Krampus from the heavens and all hell is unleashed. Now, although a horror film, Krampus deals mostly in black comedy. It's a sardonic portrayal of the most wonderful time of the year and offers far-fetched monsters and gratuitous ludicrousness, which includes giant clown toys eating children, monstrous elves and some nail-gun-happy gingerbread men. Oh, and there is also a beautiful animated section in the middle where we get an account of Krampus's previous visit to an older member of the family, detailed in a wonderfully dark scene which shows the nastiness of human nature and selfishness. Now, comedy and horror don't generally mix well. The reason for this being that comedy targets one part of the brain, whilst horror affects another. Comedy is all about stimulating the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which is the frontal lobe of the brain and deals with learning and emotional responses, and also the temporal lobe, which is involved with the interpretation of stimuli. Horror, on the other hand, goes for the almond-shaped amygdala, which, although also located in the temporal lobe, deals with the fight or flight response, regulates all the heart, lungs, and also parts of the endocrine system. So, comedy relaxes and engages the complex parts of the brain, releases hormones which can help ease stress, and horror is designed to create stress, anxiety, and also activate the oldest part of our brains, the limbic system, which has been there since our earliest days to warn us of danger and keep us alive. However, different types of comedy can affect us in different ways. In horror, when black comedy occurs, it can often be something quite graphic or disturbing, which normally isn't funny, but in the context of the film, it's something used as a lever for some light release and to subvert the tone. Dark humour may well be nasty, but it's there to relieve difficult emotions, and even in comedy shows or if you're round with the family playing Cards Against Humanity, dark humour can be a release because laughing at something you shouldn't in a room of people can be cathartic. Darkened humour can also alienate people, so it has to fit within the overall tone and context of the film. So, not wishing to try and do a lecture on brain science, the short of it all is that horror is there to scare, appall, frighten and create tension, and comedy is there to relax and, when watching a film, our brains adjust to the mood, images and sounds accordingly. So, when mixing comedy and horror, to make it work, we come to something called mood dissonance. This is what keeps Krampus as a horror film with some black comedy, and not a comedy film which parodies horror. So what is mood dissonance, and how does it work? Mood dissonance is where there is an incongruity, disharmony, and discordant contrast between two presenting themes. For Krampus, we have horror and comedy. Now, the horror stays constant and doesn't flinch at any point. We have monsters, injuries which are not slapstick or trivial, children getting eaten by clowns, people freezing to death in their trucks, and a giant horned Santa in chains trashing the neighbourhood. However, for the comedy, that dynamic comes from the characters and only the characters. Here we have accentuated stereotypes, situational unpleasantness and truly obnoxious children who leave you almost rooting for the bad guys. The joke here is that Toni Collette's rich family have to entertain the poorer, forever reproducing and gun-obsessed other side of the bloodline, and, such is the dread of this, she prepares her home for their destructive arrival and spends the first 20 minutes of the film trying to cope through gritted teeth. The characters are painted in broad strokes, with accentuation towards stereotypes, and the writers really paint a familiar picture to anyone who has had to spend Christmas with people they hate. We'll come back to the families and dark humour later though. This brings us on to tone, and, in order to make the comedy work, we need to look at what gluten enables the mood dissonance to hold together. Right from the opening scene, where we see shoppers clubbing each other to death with televisions during a Black Friday-style montage and cashiers looking like they are being held in an Al-Qaeda prison, not to mention the overlaid jaunty tone of it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas, it all adds a tone of familiarity to the carnage. Our perception is immediately set by this tone, and our connotative thoughts connect images we have seen on TV previously to those we may have experienced ourselves, and, as we pan to the lead child of our story, Max, now pummeling someone in the nativity play, the intro shows us that this is going to be a sardonic and mean-spirited film about the wonder of Christmas time. Once back in the house and now setting the scene for the forthcoming destruction, we meet the whole family. So, we've already met Max, and now we meet Tom, Sarah, Beth and the wise and reverent Omi. The family is in meltdown because it is the yearly hosting of their polar opposite, yin to the yang if you will, family of Howard, played brilliantly by David Kushner, and his wife Linda, plus their ever-growing family of children, Jordan, Stevie, Howie Jr. and baby Chrissy. Oh, and they've also bought a dog that poos a lot and the cruel Aunt Dorothy, who is the epitome of the cruel, corrosive matriarch who is never happy with anyone or anything no matter how hard they try. Like Krampus being the reverse image of Santa, Howard's family is the opposite of Tom and Sarah's family. Struggling for money, gun-obsessed, foul-mouthed, poor-mannered and obnoxious, Howard's brood is a far cry from their decent, quaint, polite and very wealthy hosts. Coming back to the horror, it's important that this stays the same as, going through the first set of brutal Krampus abductions, it's the children who are all taken first. Beth is chased by the maniacal beast until she's apprehended by a monster jack-in-the-box. Jordan is swallowed whole by an enormous clown. Howie Jr. is chained and dragged up a chimney. And, although Stevie does a little better, even the baby is abducted by the monstrous elves. Much like in the black comedy horror film Cooties, one of the first to die is a newborn baby as the infected brother mauls it to death in the back of the car. And Krampus doesn't abide by the rules of children goes last and makes sure they are all dispatched before the adults too. However, while tension builds after Beth vanishes, and before the child eating toys unwrap themselves, we get some character development and the lighter side of our mood dissonance. Now we're getting into our black comedy a bit more. So let's look at the dynamics. Howard dislikes Tom and Tom dislikes Howard. They are polar opposites of alpha males and nerdy geek dads. In this world, the nerd has made a fortune while the shepherd has to protect his flock. Howard is struggling to raise his family. Cursed with 2 teenage girls when he clearly wanted boys, Jordan and Stevie both being boys' names and dressed like boys, Howard's desire for an alpha son hasn't worked out and he makes his daughters as masculine as possible, and Howie Jr. on the other hand, he just eats everything in sight. Pre and post Beth vanishing, the family bicker, belittle each other and generally struggle to hold back their envy, distaste and dislike of this time of the year and spending time with each other. The breakdown of their Christmas and activating event which summons Krampus is when Max's letter to Santa is stolen and read out at the table by the twins. Max is far too old to believe in Santa, but doesn't want to grow up or let go of his favourite time of the year, and, as Jordan and Stevie read his letter and mock him, they are quickly ruined as the revelation that their dad wishes they were boys causes a full-on food fight to break out. Discussions then are had of why they even have to come to the house at Christmas. Max rips up his letter and the Christmas spirit dies. Also in these scenes, credit to Toni Collette, whose excellent facial expressions and comedy delivery sells the horror of being confined in a small space with people you hate and, belittled at every turn by Aunt Dorothy, her feelings of sanity wane. Her demeanour is instantly relatable to anyone who's been forced to, like I had to growing up while living with an ex, to attend Christmas with people who are only there because it's blood relation and nothing more. The dads, Tom and Howard, grow closer as their buddy-style comedy relationship grows, and then falls apart again at an equal pace. Both characters develop throughout the film as we see the nerdy Tom go from struggling to hold a gun to fighting monsters in his attic, and the emotionally stunted Howard goes from being crass to appreciating Tom's reluctant bravery. Coming to the monsters who attack the family, they are all aberrations of Christmas. However, these Victorian-looking toys, or nightmare bears from what looks like Five Nights at Freddy's, are so ridiculously over the top that, despite eating children and strangling people half to death, you have to laugh at the preposterousness of what's going on. Howard has the best fight during this rampage, fighting an army of gingerbread men armed with a nail gun, and, despite fighting for his very life against these CGI biscuits, the confrontation is shot with pace, humour, and the ultimate character redemption arc as the dog, berated for its earlier cowardice, eats the final assailant and thus saves his master's life. With Christmas-style music playing in the background, a brilliant animated section in the middle, some fantastic character dynamics based around humour, the part where Linda and Howard wonder why there are extra presents outside the door and deem it's probably because the family are rich and, well, Democrats, all go to highlight the side of Christmas which we've all experienced at some point. Seeing people you dislike, spending a day being criticised, and the general stress of feeding and entertaining a family you really can't stand is balanced against the horror perfectly. The effects in Krampus, both CG and practical, are superb, and the film knows when to ease with the comedy, such as Howard and Tom's expedition to find Beth, which veers from tension in the darkness as they track hooves and find a dead body, to the humour of Tom holding a gun for the first time and then saving Howard by firing it. As these two bond and then lie to the family, all whilst the house freezes and an army of evil-looking snowmen grow in the back garden, characters develop, bond, repair, fall out, and then ultimately fail as Krampus nears to take them all to Christmas hell. This is the dark humour I mentioned earlier, watching a group of people strain to be together, then torn apart by monsters while our already developed strong dislikes and affections are tugged at as their ridiculously nasty fates are played out before us. We are silent guests at this Christmas from hell. Comedy and horror are difficult bedfellows. Both rely on polarising emotions, so, as cited at the start, Krampus plays its horror straight. Children are eaten and abducted, injuries hurt for real, and the encroaching frozen hell outside, which looms ever closer as the fire dies, doesn't deviate from the connotations of what horror should be. Yet the ridiculous creatures, more fantastical than ghastly, the chemistry of a family bonding beneath a power cut while still grating on each other's nerves, and the zingers like, looks like Martha Stewart threw up in here, and jokes about dialysis and parents being proud of their children's Mountain Dew volcanic burps keep a smile on the face while we watch two families being wounded, eaten, dragged into the snow, and then finally facing their maker in Krampus himself. The ending of the film is ambiguous. Now trapped in a snow globe, is Krampus now monitoring them as Max took back his wish, unlike Omi in the animated mid-part of the film? So are they now on the watch list? Or is it that they are now trapped and forever destined to spend an eternity together in Christmas hell? Anyway, let's finish on the horror, comedy, mood dissonance we started with. During much of my dialectical behavioural therapy work I did with my clients, the aim was always about trying to hold two conflicting ideals at the same time, finding the balance and also finding context in conflict. Krampus walks a similar path to this. The horror and situational comedy are both very disparate, but when the black and white of comedy and horror are mashed together, there's enough darkness and light to make an acceptable grey rather than either of the two binary extremes dominating the film. The horror is in the comedy and the comedy is in the horror, but in the end we can smile and laugh, then feel our heart rates increase as monsters eat children, all in equal measure because the tone was set from the start and we are in for the ride and it feels right. As cited at the start of this video, black comedy lightens and subverts a difficult tone, and had Krampus gone purely for gore, horror and wickedness, we would have had a very different film where watching children die and a family freezing to death would have alienated parts of its audience. But by mixing characters so stereotypical and silly that they bounce off each other via opposites, contrasts and mimicking scenarios many of us have gritted our teeth through ourselves, there's a relatable darkness to the film rather than an unpleasant one. And, much like Krampus himself is dissonant to Christmas joy and the polar opposite of Santa, having a family of polar opposites, two tones lightening and darkening in equal measures, and even an ending which shows the ambiguous wonder of family at Christmas compared to the barbaric bludgeoning at the start of the movie, Krampus is a film of opposites which somehow balances itself wonderfully in the right place of being an entertaining horror film. Anyway, that's it for now, so until next time, I'll catch you later.
Looks like Martha Stewart threw up in here.